Sir, you can't be here without proper authorization. Petty Officer Jake Martinez stepped in front of the elderly man who had been shuffling toward the Naval Academy's graduation ceremony entrance, his voice sharp with the kind of authority that came from 2 years of gate duty and zero tolerance for disruption. The man was thin, maybe 5'7", with silver gray hair that hadn't seen a barber in months and clothes that looked like they'd been pulled from a donation bin. "I'm here to see my son graduate," the old man said quietly, his voice hoarse but steady. He clutched a crumpled piece of paper that looked like it had been folded and unfolded hundreds of times. "Michael Sullivan. He's graduating today." Martinez looked the homeless man up and down with undisguised distaste. Worn boots held together with duct tape, faded jeans with holes in the knees, and a military surplus jacket that had seen better decades. Everything about him screamed vagrant, and everything about this situation screamed security risk. "Sir, this is a formal military ceremony," Martinez replied, his tone making it clear that the old man didn't belong anywhere near the pristine grounds of the Naval Academy. Family members need proper identification, dress code compliance, and advance registration. The homeless man, Robert Sullivan, though Martinez hadn't bothered to ask his name, reached into his jacket pocket with slow, deliberate movements. His hands were weathered and scarred, the kind of hands that spoke of hard living and harder times. "I have identification," Robert said, pulling out a battered wallet that looked like it might fall apart if handled too roughly. Martinez examined the driver's license with professional skepticism. The address was a P.O. box. The photo showed a man who looked 20 pounds heavier and infinitely more respectable, and everything about the situation suggested this was either stolen or fraudulent. "This doesn't prove you're related to anyone graduating today," Martinez said, handing the license back with obvious reluctance. "And frankly, sir, your appearance isn't appropriate for a military ceremony of this caliber." The words hit Robert like physical blows, but he had learned over the past 3 years of homelessness that fighting back only made situations worse. He had been kicked out of restaurants, libraries, shelters, and now, apparently, his own son's graduation ceremony. "Please," Robert said, his voice carrying a desperation he couldn't quite hide. "I haven't seen Michael in 2 years. I just want to watch him graduate. I'll stand in the back. I won't cause any trouble." Martinez felt a flicker of sympathy. The old man seemed genuinely broken rather than dangerous, but rules were rules, and this was one of the most prestigious military ceremonies in the country. "Sir, I'm sorry, but I can't allow you onto the grounds. If you're really related to a graduating midshipman, you should have received official invitation materials weeks ago." "I did," Robert said, unfolding the crumpled paper he'd been clutching. "Michael sent me this." Martinez examined the paper and realized it was, indeed, an official graduation invitation. But it was addressed to Robert Sullivan at a residential address that clearly no longer applied, and it looked like it had been rescued from a trash can. "Sir, this invitation is for someone with a permanent address. Are you?" "Homeless," Robert finished quietly. "Yes, I'm homeless, but I'm still his father." The admission hung in the air between them. Martinez had dealt with hundreds of situations involving family drama, security concerns, and protocol violations. But this was different. This was a man who had clearly fallen as far as it was possible to fall, but who was still trying to be present for what might be the most important day of his son's life. "Sir, even if I wanted to help you, there are dress code requirements, security protocols." "Jake, what's the holdup?" The voice came from behind Martinez, sharp and authoritative. He turned to see Commander Luis Rodriguez approaching, a man in his 40s with the kind of bearing that suggested both high rank and recent combat experience. "Commander, we have a situation with an unauthorized individual claiming to be family of a graduating midshipman." Rodriguez looked at Robert with the professional assessment of someone accustomed to making quick judgments about people. What he saw was clearly a homeless veteran, the military surplus jacket, the bearing that hadn't been entirely erased by years of hard living, and most tellingly, the way Robert unconsciously straightened to attention when addressed by a superior officer. "What branch did you serve in?" Rodriguez asked, his tone neither friendly nor hostile, just professionally curious. "Navy, sir," Robert replied automatically. 20 years active duty. When did you retire? 2018, sir. Rodriguez felt something shift in his assessment. A homeless veteran was one thing unfortunately common and tragic, but not unprecedented. But a veteran who had served until 2018 and was now homeless suggested a more recent and dramatic fall from grace. What rate? Robert hesitated, and Rodriguez saw something flicker across his weathered features, not shame, but the kind of caution that came from learning that his military service often raised more questions than it answered. SEAL, sir. Senior Chief Petty Officer. The admission stopped both Martinez and Rodriguez cold. Navy SEALs were the elite of the elite, warriors who underwent some of the most rigorous training and dangerous missions in the military. The idea that a former SEAL could end up homeless and desperate was almost incomprehensible. Senior Chief, Rodriguez said carefully, what SEAL team? Again, that hesitation. Robert's pale blue eyes moved between the two men, calculating what to reveal and what to keep hidden. Team 6, sir. DevGru. Rodriguez felt the world tilt slightly. SEAL Team 6 was legendary, the unit that had eliminated Osama bin Laden, the most classified and elite special operations force in the American military. If this homeless man was telling the truth, they were talking to one of the most dangerous and highly trained individuals on the planet. What's your name? Senior Chief? Robert Sullivan, sir. Though most people called me Ghost. The nickname hit Rodriguez like lightning. Ghost Sullivan was a legend in the SEAL community, a senior enlisted man who had served with distinction in Iraq and Afghanistan, known for his ability to appear and disappear without detection and his uncanny skill at training younger SEALs in advanced combat techniques. Rodriguez had never met Ghost personally, but he had heard the stories. Dozens of successful missions, multiple decorations for valor, and a reputation for bringing his men home alive from situations that should have been impossible to survive. Senior Chief Sullivan, Rodriguez said, his entire demeanor shifting to one of profound respect. Why didn't you identify yourself immediately? Robert's expression grew sad. Because in my experience, sir, people either don't believe me or they ask questions I'm not allowed to answer. Rodriguez understood immediately. Much of SEAL Team 6's work was classified at levels that would remain secret for decades. Ghost Sullivan couldn't discuss most of his military service, which made proving his credentials nearly impossible. Martinez, Rodriguez said quietly, "This man is coming with me. Sir, he doesn't meet dress code requirements. Petty officer, this man has probably saved more American lives than we'll ever know. If he wants to watch his son graduate, we're going to make sure that happens." Rodriguez turned back to Robert. Senior Chief, when was the last time you had a proper meal? Yesterday, sir. The mission downtown serves lunch on weekdays. The casual mention of needing charity meals to survive hit Rodriguez harder than he'd expected. This was a man who had served his country at the highest levels, who had risked his life repeatedly for national security, and who was now dependent on homeless shelters and soup kitchens. Come with me, Rodriguez said. We're going to get you cleaned up and properly dressed for your son's graduation. An hour later, Robert Sullivan looked like a different person. Rodriguez had arranged for him to shower in the bachelor officer's quarters, provided him with a borrowed dress uniform that fit reasonably well, and made sure he had proper credentials to enter the ceremony. But more than his appearance had changed. Standing in front of a mirror, wearing the uniform he had earned through 20 years of service, Robert looked like what he truly was, not a homeless vagrant, but a warrior who had temporarily lost his way. How do you feel, Senior Chief? Rodriguez asked as they prepared to head to the ceremony. Like myself again, sir. Thank you for that. Don't thank me yet. Let's go watch your son become a naval officer. The graduation ceremony was being held on the Academy's parade grounds, with hundreds of family members seated in organized sections, while the graduating midshipmen stood in perfect formation. It was a display of military precision and tradition that represented the culmination of 4 years of intense academic and military training. Robert found himself seated in the family section, surrounded by proud parents who had watched their children progress through one of the most prestigious military academies in the world. He scanned the ranks of graduating midshipmen, looking for the son he hadn't seen in 2 years. There, third row, fourth from the left. Midshipman Michael Sullivan, looking crisp and professional in his dress uniform, standing at attention with the bearing of a young officer ready to serve his country. Robert felt his chest tighten with emotion. His son looked exactly like Robert himself had looked 30 years earlier, young, confident, ready to take on the world. But Michael also looked like a stranger, and Robert realized how much he had missed during his descent into homelessness and isolation. The ceremony proceeded with the formal precision that military traditions demanded. Speeches from senior officers, presentation of commissions, and finally, the moment when the new ensigns were officially welcomed into the United States Navy. That's when Robert saw him. SEAL Commander James Martinez, not the petty officer from the gate, but a senior officer with a distinctive trident pin that marked him as a member of the Navy's most elite fighting force. Martinez was part of the reviewing party, standing with other senior officers as they observed the ceremony. And Martinez was staring directly at Robert. Not the casual glance that people gave to other audience members, but the focused, intense stare of someone who was trying to process something impossible. Martinez's eyes kept moving to Robert's left forearm, where the edge of a tattoo was visible below the borrowed uniform's sleeve. Robert realized what Martinez was seeing. The faded but still distinctive ink that marked him as a member of an extremely exclusive brotherhood, the Navy SEAL Trident, with additional markings that identified specific units and deployments. Martinez excused himself from the reviewing party and began making his way through the crowd toward Robert's section. His movement was casual but purposeful, the kind of approach that suggested he was operating on instinct and experience rather than protocol. "Excuse me," Martinez said quietly as he reached Robert's row. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Robert felt his stomach drop. He had hoped to get through the ceremony without drawing attention, to simply watch his son graduate and then disappear back into the anonymity of homelessness. "Of course, sir," Robert replied, following Martinez to a more private area at the edge of the ceremony grounds. Martinez was studying Robert with the kind of intensity that suggested he was comparing current reality to memories that didn't quite match. "Senior Chief," Martinez said quietly, "could you show me your left forearm?" Robert hesitated, then rolled up his sleeve to reveal the tattoo that had caught Martinez's attention. The Navy SEAL Trident was there, along with dates, coordinates, and symbols that meant nothing to civilians but told a complete story to anyone who understood special operations. Martinez stared at the tattoo for a long moment, then looked up at Robert with an expression of stunned recognition. "Senior Chief Sullivan, Ghost, Afghanistan, 2015, Operation Neptune's Fury." The words hit Robert like a physical blow. Operation Neptune's Fury was one of the most classified missions he had ever participated in, a hostage rescue operation that had saved the lives of 12 American contractors who had been captured by Taliban forces in the Hindu Kush. Mountains. "You were there, Commander?" "Lieutenant Martinez at the time," the younger man replied, his voice filled with emotion. "You saved my life. All our lives. When we were pinned down by enemy fire for 18 hours, you kept us alive." Robert remembered now. A young lieutenant, barely 25 years old, leading his first major operation when everything had gone wrong. Intelligence had been faulty, extraction had been delayed, and 12 Navy SEALs had found themselves surrounded in hostile territory with limited ammunition and no immediate support. "You did your job, Lieutenant. That's all any of us did." "My job?" Martinez's voice cracked slightly. "Senior Chief, you spent 18 hours picking off enemy positions with a rifle that had a cracked scope while keeping 12 men calm and focused in impossible conditions. When my nerve broke, you talked me through it. When Henderson got hit, you kept him alive until medevac could reach us." Robert remembered Henderson, a young SEAL who had taken a bullet in the chest and would have bled out if not for immediate field medical care that Robert had provided under enemy fire. "Is Henderson?" "Alive, married, 2 kids, still active duty. He talks about you all the time. We all do." The conversation was interrupted by movement in the ceremony. The formal proceedings were concluding, and family members were being invited to congratulate the new officers. Martinez looked back toward the graduating class, then at Robert. "Senior Chief, your son is about to become a naval officer. But first, there's something I need to do." Before Robert could object, Martinez was walking back toward the ceremony platform, his bearing suggesting he was about to make an official announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martinez's voice carried clearly across the parade grounds, amplified by the ceremony's public address system, If I could have your attention for a moment. The crowd quieted, hundreds of family members and new officers turning their attention to the SEAL commander, who was clearly deviating from the planned program. Today we celebrate the commissioning of 247 new naval officers. But I also want to take a moment to recognize someone else, a warrior, who embodies the values that these young officers will be expected to uphold. Robert felt his face flush as he realized what Martinez was about to do. Senior Chief Petty Officer Robert Sullivan, call sign Ghost, served our country for 20 years as a member of SEAL Team 6. He participated in dozens of classified operations, saved countless American lives, and exemplifies the brotherhood that makes our special operations forces the most effective in the world. The crowd was now completely focused on Martinez, but Robert could see confusion on many faces. They had no idea who he was talking about or why this was relevant to their children's graduation ceremony. Senior Chief Sullivan is here today to watch his son, Ensign Michael Sullivan, receive his commission. But what Ensign Sullivan may not know is that his father is one of the most decorated and respected warriors in the history of Navy Special Operations. Robert saw Michael's face in the formation of new officers. His son was staring at him with an expression of complete shock, as if he was seeing his father for the first time. In 2015, during Operation Neptune's Fury in Afghanistan, Senior Chief Sullivan saved the lives of 12 Navy SEALs, including mine, during an 18-hour firefight against overwhelming enemy forces. He has been awarded the Navy Cross, 3 Silver Stars, and 4 Bronze Stars for valor. The crowd was now staring at Robert with a mixture of awe and confusion. The homeless man they might have dismissed as a vagrant was being described as one of America's most elite warriors. Senior Chief, would you please join me? Robert wanted nothing more than to disappear, but Martinez was giving him an order, and 20 years of military discipline made refusal impossible. He made his way through the crowd toward the ceremony platform, aware that hundreds of people were now focused on him. Ladies and gentlemen, Martinez continued as Robert approached. Senior Chief Robert Sullivan. The applause started slowly, then built as the crowd began to understand what they were witnessing. These were military families who understood the significance of the decorations Martinez had mentioned, who recognized that they were in the presence of genuine heroism. But Robert only had eyes for his son. Michael was still standing in formation, but his face showed a mixture of emotions that Robert couldn't entirely read: shock, confusion, and maybe, just maybe, pride. "Michael," Robert said, his voice barely audible over the applause. "I'm sorry I haven't been the father you deserved, but I'm so proud of the man you've become." That's when the ceremony broke completely. Michael stepped out of formation, a serious breach of protocol that no one seemed inclined to address, and walked toward his father with tears streaming down his face. "Dad," Michael said, his voice choked with emotion, "I didn't know. I never knew any of this." "Because I couldn't tell you," Robert replied, embracing his son for the first time in 2 years. "Most of what I did is classified. And after your mother died, after I lost the house and ended up on the streets, I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me like that." "But why didn't you get help?" "The VA, military support programs." Robert's expression darkened. "Son, the system is complicated. My disability claims got lost in bureaucracy for 2 years. My PTSD went untreated. Your mother's medical bills bankrupted us, even with insurance. I fell through the cracks, and by the time I tried to climb out, I was too far down." The conversation was being overheard by dozens of people, including senior military officers who were beginning to understand the scope of the failure that had allowed a decorated SEAL to end up homeless and desperate. Commander Rodriguez, who had initially helped Robert prepare for the ceremony, approached them with an expression of grim determination. "Senior Chief," Rodriguez said, "this ends today. We're going to fix this. Sir, your disability claims, your benefits, your housing situation, all of it. You served this country with distinction, and the country is going to serve you better than it has." Over the following hours, as the formal ceremony concluded and families celebrated their new officers, Robert found himself surrounded by military personnel who were working to address the systemic failures that had led to his homelessness. Phone calls were made to VA officials. Emergency housing was arranged. Medical appointments were scheduled. And most importantly, Robert's service record was reviewed. by people with the authority and influence to ensure that his benefits were processed correctly. But the most important change was in his relationship with Michael. "Dad," his son said as they sat together in the BOQ where Robert would be staying until permanent housing could be arranged, "tell me about Mom's last days. Tell me about what happened after the funeral. Tell me everything." So Robert told him about the cancer that had consumed his wife slowly and expensively, about the experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover, about the choice between his wife's medical care and their financial stability. He told Michael about the PTSD that had gone untreated for years because he was too proud to admit that the invincible Navy SEAL needed mental health support, about the drinking that had started as self-medication and evolved into dependency, about the spiral of poor decisions that had cost him his job, his house, and ultimately his relationship with his son. "I should have been there for you," Michael said when the story was finished. "You were in college, then at the academy. You had your own life to build. I didn't want my problems to derail your future. But you're my father. Your problems are my problems. Your victories are my victories." Robert felt something healing in his chest. A wound that had been festering for 3 years was finally beginning to close. "I'm proud of you, son. Not just for graduating, but for the man you've become despite my failures as a father. You didn't fail as a father, Dad. You failed as a human being for a while, but that's not the same thing. And now you're getting help. Now we can fix this." 3 months later, Robert Sullivan was living in VA-sponsored transitional housing, receiving treatment for PTSD and substance abuse, and working part-time as a consultant for a military training program that helped prepare young SEALs for the psychological challenges of special operations. His disability benefits had been retroactively approved, providing him with both income and medical coverage. More importantly, he had reconnected not only with Michael, but with other members of his former unit who had been trying to locate him for years. "Ghost," Commander Martinez said during one of their regular meetings, "I have a proposition for you." "What kind of proposition?" "The Navy is developing a new program for transitioning special operations personnel. We need someone with your experience to help identify the warning signs of the kind of spiral you went through and to help other warriors get the support they need before they fall through the cracks." Robert considered the offer. It would mean returning to military service in a consulting capacity, drawing on his worst experiences to help others avoid similar pitfalls. "Would I be helping prevent other SEALs from ending up homeless and broken?" "That's exactly what you'd be doing." "Then I accept." The program that Robert helped develop became a model for military services around the world. By identifying the specific challenges that special operations personnel faced during transition to civilian life, the program was able to provide targeted support that prevented many of the systemic failures that had nearly destroyed Robert's life. But the most important part of Robert's recovery was his renewed relationship with his son. Michael had been assigned to a destroyer in the Pacific Fleet, and their regular correspondence had rebuilt the bond that homelessness and shame had nearly severed. On the first anniversary of Michael's graduation, father and son met at the Naval Academy for a private ceremony recognizing Robert's contributions to military mental health programs. "Dad," Michael said as they walked across the same parade grounds where Robert had been publicly honored a year earlier, "I have something for you." Michael handed his father a small wooden box. Inside was a military medal that Robert had never seen before, a special commendation created specifically to recognize his work with transitioning veterans. The inscription says, "Senior Chief Petty Officer Robert Sullivan, Warrior, Father, Healer," Michael explained. Robert felt tears in his eyes as he read the words. "Healer? Because you've helped dozens of other veterans avoid the trap you fell into. Because you turned your worst experience into something that saves other people. Because you figured out how to come home from war, finally." Robert looked at the medal, then at his son, then at the academy buildings where young officers were being trained to serve their country. He thought about the homeless man who had been turned away from these same grounds a year earlier, and about the journey that had brought him from that low point to this moment of recognition and purpose. "You know what the best part is?" Robert asked his son. "What's that?" "I finally understand what it means to serve. For 20 years, I thought service meant going to war. But now I know that sometimes the most important mission is helping other warriors find their way home." The Navy SEAL, who had once been known as Ghost, had learned that the most important battle wasn't fought against foreign enemies, but against the demons that followed warriors home from war. And in winning that battle, not just for himself, but for others like him, he had finally completed the mission that mattered most. The trident tattoo on his forearm was no longer a symbol of past glory, but a reminder of ongoing responsibility. And Robert Sullivan, Senior Chief Petty Officer, decorated warrior, and recovering homeless veteran, was exactly where he belonged, serving his country by serving his brothers in arms who were still fighting battles that no one else could see. The ceremony that had started with shame and recognition had become the beginning of a new mission, one that would save more lives than all his combat operations combined. Sometimes the most important victories were won not with weapons, but with understanding, compassion, and the simple recognition that warriors, no matter how far they had fallen, were still worthy of the brotherhood they had earned.